Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This webinar is brought to you by Strategies 2.0, a statewide collaborative funded by the California Office of Child Abuse Prevention. Today's webinar is Engaging Fathers in Practice. The webinar is scheduled from 10 until 11:30. My name is Carrie Collins, and I will be your facilitator today. My role is to introduce the topic and the presenter, keep track of time, and help the presenters and all of you participants in any way that you may need. In a moment, I will introduce Shandi to you, but I first want to go over a few of the webinar guidelines. So all of you hopefully have a little taskbar that you see with a red arrow. You can minimize your taskbar simply by clicking on that red arrow. You can join us today either by telephone or by the speakers in your computer. If you find that you're having a hard time hearing this webinar, or if it sounds a little bit warbled to you, for lack of a better word, I would suggest that you switch over to your telephone. When you do that, it will give you an access code and a PIN number, and you'll need to enter both of those things. And especially your PIN number if you happen to want to ask a question to Shandi direct. We will be using the chat box today for any questions or comments that you may have. My colleague, Shay Meserve, is also on the line today, and she will be managing that chat box for us. She'll be putting some interesting information in there as we go through. If Shandi mentions an author or a website, she will enter that information in there for you. We are going to hold questions until the very end. Shandi is leaving about 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the presentation today to answer any questions that you may have. But we are going to have some polling questions throughout the webinar today. So I will be launching some questions and giving you all a little bit of time to answer those questions, and then we will show you the results of those answers. So it's a really fun and interesting way to be involved in today's webinar. You can raise your hand if you want me to unmute you at the end and ask a question directly to Shandi, or you can put your question in the chat box and we will let him know what your question is. I have muted all of you today except for Shandi and Shane, so don't worry about any background noise that you may have going on in your office or at home, because all of that has been muted. So with that, I would like to introduce to you our presenter for today. As the program manager of Dads Matter since 2016, Shandi Johnson, a fatherhood advocate, is intimately familiar with the challenges of engaging fathers in human services. With over 15 years of experience managing social service and nonprofit programs, focusing on grandparents raising their grandchildren, family reunification, children with special needs, new moms, and father involvement, he has used his influence to insert fathers into the parenting narrative in Orange County. Shandi received his MSW from the University of Southern California with a focus on children and families. Through the Dads Matter program, the evidence-based parenting curriculum supporting father involvement, or SFI, is implemented as the primary intervention. It's really my honor and my pleasure to welcome my colleague and my friend, Shandi Johnson, to be our presenter today. So I'm now going to turn this over to him as our presenter.
Are we live?
There you go.
All right. Hey, well, first of all, again, I just want to say good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the part of the world. And welcome to Engaging Fathers in Practice. We're going to spend some time refining service, addressing barriers, and setting expectations. Really want to give a big shout out to Strategies for the work that they do on the daily, and for my friend Carrie, who approached me about this about a year ago. And she was very patient with me, which I appreciate, and very kind in supporting me through this. So now we are here, and I get a chance to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So again, welcome to this training. As we go through this journey this morning, as you may have noticed when you go back to my picture, I had my two mini-me's that were on my bookends, right? My bookends. So we're sitting there, and I just love those guys. They're my pride and joy. They will remain nameless because I barely got their consent to even have them in the picture on there. My wife and I, who've been married for 16 incredible years, and when I say incredible years, I'm not saying that everything has been perfect, but we've worked really hard to be the best version of a family together as a couple, sharing in the responsibilities of supporting each other and comforting each other, raising our children, creating individuals of character, holding ourselves to our standards. When we first, by the way, on our first, within our first couple of months, we've kind of gone through this exercise where we're actually coming up with names for our kids. Not suggested that you go out and actually ever try that; it could scare a person off. But we kind of knew where we were going with this thing, and so we just started having preliminary conversations about it. And all the way through our first couple of years until our son was born, we talked about what that experience was going to look like. We've been having this conversation from conception to the present day, that we would be there as an equal yoke, both putting forth 100% effort to be there to support the kids and to raise the kids. So what that meant for us was 100% participation in all doctor's appointments, including the OBGYN appointments, be present, of course, in the birthing room, conferences, at school, extracurricular activities. We talked about all that. And although we haven't hit 100%, we come pretty close to making it to most of them. I would say one or both of us are at every single one, and the large majority we're at 7 out of 10. We're both there, and that's been something I'm proud to say. I still strive for a higher number of participations. I've been really fortunate to work in some positions and some agencies that have supported my fatherhood journey and my fatherhood commitments, because I am a family man first. I'm a worker and a servant second. Right. So I've also been on the side of a support father, supporting my kids through, I'm the primary drop off for pickup person. I have coached and assistant coached their youth teams. Probably didn't want me in that role as much as I have been. I've been able to be the supporting parents as they've gone through, STEM programs, magic classes, school plays, and things like that. Man, it's part of my life journey. And I share this with you because as we get going and set the stage, many of the things that I'm going to share are based on my lens as a father and experiencing, and my experiences walking through the door with my wife and how I've been engaged professionally. We have this conversation as often as possible, exploring ways to engage family members through various programs. But I'm going to try to combine and talk about it from both perspectives, because it shapes who I am. So again, as we move through this together, I invite you to look at both of your professional and personal experiences. So as a personal experience, what really has worked and made you feel welcome when you access certain services, right? Kind of let that marinate a little bit and think of what made you, when you walk out, it felt different. And when times, and at times, you haven't had that same experience. Would you recall about that, if anything? And professionally, when you think about yourself or as a team and how you've been welcoming with strategies, whether intentional or not intentional, that you've engaged in to welcome fathers in your practices. And this is not for anyone to walk away and say they need to, that what they've done and what they have been doing even needs any kind of readdressing. Some of you, I anticipate, will walk away saying we're doing a lot of these things and we're continuing to make improvements. For those of you who are end up in a place where you're thinking we could be a little bit different or more proactive or become more proficient at this, then this is definitely a space for you and for the conversations that we need to have. But I am sure this field that we are in, helping people, giving back to the community, it's so important. It brings values to families on a daily basis, and I recognize and acknowledge that for everyone here, whatever population that you're serving. Our program, the program that I manage, that Carrie mentioned, Dads Matter with Children's Bureau, we actually have a position. It's a CQI coordinator, Nick Mazio. Nick's job is to continuously ask our team to explore and question whether or not we're bringing the most value to our efforts to serve families, to engage families. Even when we're knocking out the park, and my goal is to only make no more than 3 sports references during this, but even when we're knocking out the park, his job is to stop and ask us if we're being as effective as we can be in our services and our efforts, right? That's not always the easiest conversation to have, but because we keep that at the forefront of our mind, we were able to go, we were able to increase like our average class size enrollment, butts and seats from a class size of 5 in year 1 to almost 12 in year 4. And we're continuously, adding more classes. And when we were doing 5, we were only doing a limited number of classes. We were doing 16 a year. We're up to 30. And we are still able to have over 11, close to 12 fathers start off at every class. And that's really important to us because it means that we are always we're always taking those progressive steps forward. And that's when we can get to that point as a program, then we can help impact other agencies that we collaborate with. So I made the switch, a little bit more about me, to working with families in about 2002, and I was coming from the print industry. So in the print industry, I was focused on newspapers, magazines, just financial print stuff, but our product was typically some type of design, produced print material. I worked with vendors, writers, ad people. For all you, I think it was an AMC show. For all you Mad Men people, think Mad Men. But we weren't as cool. We didn't wear suits and stuff like that. But our audience that we had to engage was the audience who patronized our materials. So for me, engagement meant that we had really high outputs. We had a high number of subscriptions, or our direct sales at stores, ranked really high. We didn't have a lot of materials coming back or being recycled. So making the switch to work with people directly, I had to shift my focus because again, my focus point of engagement switched from, the recognition of how engaged we were with our population that we served, our community, our client base was recognized by units sold. Now I had to look at people, where now we recognize engagement for our program as, just like I shared with that statistic, not just enrolling or, as we say, putting butts in seats, but how many of those seats stayed filled through the length of service. So currently, and I'm not throwing a bunch of numbers up here, we have 6 out of 10 fathers who routinely finish services. And that's a really great place to be for something that wasn't in existence for at least our county 5 years ago. And we're still making improvements because Nick holds us to that. So it's a bit of adjustment for the decision. If I was at the same place in my life, I would make the decision 10 out of 10 times because a lot of the intrinsic value that I get from it. So as we're talking about engaged fathers, I don't want people to think it's a binary topic, meaning everything has to be one way or the other. When we think about a label like welcoming or the act of greeting someone in a glad, friendly, polite way, does that mean that behaviors that if a person doesn't experience that it automatically means that there's some shunning or rejecting that's occurring in that space? And most times it's not. It's really this concept or this construct of neutrality, or the absence of either welcoming or rejecting ways. Is kind of the middle. So you have a guy who comes into your lobby with the mom, and he's not necessarily greeted. He's not engaged in he's not invited to participate in the conversation about whatever service that they're looking at. It's just the primary parent who's in front, and in many cases, that person who's going to take the lead on that in those situations is the mom. So it's this neutral zone that exists, that we have an opportunity to engage an individual, and in recognizing these opportunities, then we can really make a lot of progress. One other thing before we jump into this, know this about me, and you may not be able to tell. You can see family. I'm going the wrong way. Family and love behind me. I'm a connection person. I'm a different type of dude, not better or worse than anybody. I'm just me. But I recognize that it's often difficult for people to be neutral with me. So especially in small settings, I walk in, I just jump right in, just jump into the pool, and that's what I do. I'll walk in, I'll walk up front. I'm that type of person who will read somebody's name tag and address them by name, oftentimes, which is sometimes a little bit off-putting. I've experienced it when people call me by name, but it's a way for me to kind of jumpstart that engagement process. And it's been something I've done for the majority of my life, without being necessarily intentional about it, just being who I am. So I don't hold people to that standard of engagement. And so I'm thinking that as you're thinking about engagement for your agency or wherever perspective that you're coming from, really think about your population. That's the invitation, right? Like, I'm wired to do this. So other people aren't, and I have to recognize that. So when we talk about this information, think about it. I'm going to be coming from my own rose-colored lenses. So before we get started into this, let's get a little bit of information from you. we got our first poll. And in this poll, it's going to ask, what type of service do you provide? A, are you a prevention service? Do you provide medical services, educational, mental health, recreational, or other? Please list. I'll give you about 30 seconds to figure out where you fall in there. And for some people, maybe multiple selections.
Also, if you do something that is not listed on this, go ahead and put that in the chat box. And Shandi, I need you to advance your slide forward, by the way.
Gotcha. Oh, my goodness.
So I'm going to leave this open for a little while longer. We have 64% that have voted so far. Let's keep going. And I'm going to close this poll in 5 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it, and then I'm going to share the results. So, Shandi, we have 57% that are in prevention services, only 2% in medical services, 33% in educational, 6% in mental health, and 2% in recreational. Shane, did we have some list other in the chat box for us?
Yep, we have Rosa Garcia, who's in Child Care Resource Services.
Okay, thank you so much. So now back to you, Sean.
Oh, thanks you guys for participating. It's earlier or a couple of minutes ago, I talked about really understanding the fathers who are coming into services, and your engagement is going to look different based on the service that they're coming into, right? Low-hanging fruit, recreational is the easiest to engage father. Like I mentioned, use my own personal narrative as an adult. I assistant coached, and I've been coached for a lot of these things. And even when I wasn't, depending on what sport they're playing and my knowledge of it, or lack of knowledge, some may say, I've inserted myself into, hey, how can I be of help for you, practicing outside. So engaging fathers in recreation is going to look a lot different than engaging fathers in prevention services or in educational. I happen to supervise another program. It's the Magnolia School District social work intern program. What we do is we support within the school district 9 different schools through mental health services with the help of social worker interns. They could be in their first or second year. Some have aspirations of being in school social work. We do mental health case management. We do groups and consultations with the teachers. And we try to use our lens as social workers to help kind of make sure that we are in that spirit of collaboration, because everyone has their needs that they're trying to be met. We're trying to focus on that. So those are going to be different. When I'm there at the school district, I see a lot of fathers at pick up and drop off time, right? And the fathers are there, but that doesn't mean that they are there, like a lot of parents. And so how to figure out how to get them from the parking lot inside are different things that you can do, and we're going to talk about. Prevention services are a lot of times we come by way of being voluntold to participate in these programs, or, some of them are mandated programs that they have to do. At that point, a lot of families that we work with are in a state of crisis. And again, how we approach them can mean the difference of engaging them or not. One of the things that we know is that if we engage all the engagements, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, all the engagement efforts that we've used to date have been really successful in terms of engaging and bringing moms in. And largely, we haven't had that same experience for fathers. I'm not going to sit here and say that we got to reinvent the wheel, but we just have to be able to apply our own colored lenses when we're making these engagement efforts apply to working with fathers. So let me hit you with this quote. So the quote is, "Nothing so needs reforming as other people's habits." Now, it's by my man Mark Twain, named by his parents as Samuel Langhorne Clemens, often been lauded as the father of American literature. Look him up if you haven't had a chance to. So when I read that, nothing so needs reforming as other people's habits, I actually go with my own habits. It's where I live. I can't worry about other people's habits. I can control what I can't control. A habit, and we're going to use this as a definition for today. A habit, excuse me, is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. So when you think about habits, I think about some of the things that I don't like doing differently. When I walk into a classroom, And I sit in the same place every day. I'm going way back decades when I'm in school. By the way, my 30-year reunion was this weekend that I missed. Actually, I shouldn't say I missed, because that would imply that I wasn't in tune of it. I knew it was going on. I just didn't go. But yeah, I can remember in school, vividly walking into, all the way through grad school, into a class, expecting for my seat to be there, and it wasn't there. And I had a very difficult time of accepting that seat didn't have my name on it. But I think of a habit. I think of the way that I drive to work every day. I typically go one or two ways. And in those one or two ways, what ends up happening is I get to where I want to be in the way that I get there and the way that I'm comfortable. Every now and then there's an accident, and I have to, in ways, gives me like this crazy, route through neighborhoods and around shopping centers that I find very frustrating. It's a really awkward when I have to change up these habits. If I ask you to, as a habit, I think about change theories, things that you want to change. Some habits are really positive. Some are not so. Some are kind of neutral, like brushing my teeth. I brush my teeth with my right hand. At one point in my life, I had two jammed fingers, and I couldn't use my right hand to fully grasp the toothbrush. So I had to use my left hand. Probably wasn't a good couple of weeks for me and the people who had to talk closely with me. But it was an awkward thing until I kind of got used to doing it. My point is that habits aren't easily broken. And so I equate that to some of the work that we're doing that's been successful in terms of bringing families in the door. But the families, as we have largely defined them, has been, the mom and the children. So let's see. How that applies to fathers in general is what we're discussing today. So as my friend Carrie introduced me, I'm going to go into detail more so about the program that I'm with. I'm the program manager of the Father Involvement Program called Dads Matter through Children's Bureau of Southern California. We went live with services 4 years ago. It was July 2006. We went live with services July 2016, and we've been doing classes and work supporting fathers ever since. About our agency and who we are Children's Bureau. And I'll give you a little bit of information on Children's Bureau. Children's Bureau was established in 1904, so I'm a social worker, not a math guy, but I'm going to try to take a stab at it. About 115 years of doing business, being advocates in the community of protecting vulnerable children. Our mission is protecting vulnerable children through prevention, treatment, and advocacy. Dads Matter is one of the prevention programs that exists in Orange County. As Children's Bureau is one of the largest investors in child abuse prevention in the U.S., and for all of our programs that range from, if you're familiar with California, Southern California, from Lancaster to Santa Clarita to LA to Long Beach and to where we are out in Orange County. For the program Dads Matter, it's actually funded through ACS, Administration of Children and Families, federal program. And when we got the grant in October of 2015, it was the first time that Children's Bureau was ever awarded a federal grant, and that was really exciting for us as an agency. I was able to join the team in January of 2016, and since then we've been on this grind to provide the best services and supports and education for families that we can. Let's see, we serve annually. Our goal is to serve 300 fathers in Orange County, and for us, we say that's at-risk families or at-risk fathers, and we define at-risk fathers by saying that these fathers have either they're living in impoverished conditions or living in poverty. These fathers have immigrant status, or these fathers are young fathers. I say that just to say that that's who our target audience is in terms of fathers in Orange County. However, we have never turned away a father coming and saying that they need help. That's really important for us. As a philosophy, our program starts off with this. We believe that fathers are just as important as mothers in the parenting process. So Dads Matter not in general, what we do is we offer parenting workshops from the lens of a father. So that's how we're different from other programs and other parenting classes. So we really attack it from the lens of a father. We focus on co-parenting and financial stability. We provide case management, resource linkages, and fund days, and an overall host of supports. That's us in a nutshell. You can find us on www.allforkids.org/dads. I know we're on Twitter and we're on Facebook, so you may be able to access some information there, some of our events. All the services we provide are offered at no cost to the participant. So these services are fully funded. We are able to offer some incentives along the way and some other program supports, including meals at just about all the services that we offer, and childcare when we're doing activities with the kids. So we had mentioned, or in my bio, it talked about as our primary intervention, we have a curriculum that we use called Supporting Father Involvement. We've recently added and are going live with this new curriculum that's going to be used for to engage fathers as well. It's called Dads for Life, and I'll share a little bit about both. So SFI, Supporting Father Involvement, it was developed by a quartet of really smart people who get it, right? Who get that father should be part of the narrative. There are Doctors Carolyn and Phil Cowan, they're on the West Coast, and Doctors Kyle and Marcia Pruitt, who are on the East Coast. The SFI curriculum is a 16-week curriculum that looks at 5 relationship or systems that can impact the father's involvement with his children and family. These 5 areas or systems are his relationship with himself, relationship with the co-parent or other birth parent, his relationship with children. We spent some time getting through the generational views, so how this person came to have these ideas of what a father should look like, with their impact, their personal experience, and then we look at the environment and external factors that impact fathers, right? So then we move on to Dads for Life. Family, it was authored through Family Wellness Associates. Dads for Life was specifically created to motivate and equip men to be the best dads that they can be. It has all the beliefs that all dads, regardless of their context or background, can acquire the skills necessary to enhance their relationships with their children and their family in order to leave a legacy that positively impacts future generations. So again, I mentioned that we target at-risk fathers in Orange County. Again, we haven't turned away anybody who said that they needed help, and that's important for us. So who we aim to serve are fathers who want to be there, fathers who are involved but maybe not as engaged, or engaged and maybe not, however you want to define those things. We're looking at increasing involvement overall with the father and his family, whether or not he's in a romantic relationship with his co-parent or not. And these services are only offered in Orange County. So I've kept you guys going for 30 minutes and you're still not sure exactly what I'm talking about. My fault. They covered this. I believe Carrie covered this earlier. I will definitely leave answers. She said 15 or 10, so I can talk for days if you guys can't tell that already. We'll allow some time to answer some questions at the end. We are definitely going to go through why engaging fathers is important, understanding some of your engagement habits. How do you move the needle and really get things started? And our goals are, when you walk out of this, hopefully you're a little bit more self-aware. And that can make a huge difference in the way that we engage with people. We're going to understand some of our engagement habits and walking out with some practical application tips. A couple other things that we're going to cover: exploring the differences engaging men in services, discussing how society has traditionally serviced men in the health-related services, exploring, I say health and human, so we're not going medical, health and human-related services, exploring what barriers currently exist for the fathers accessing services, and maybe suggest some strategies on a micro or macro level that you'll be able to introduce to your population served. With that said, we're jumping into poll number 2. So how many of the children you work with have involved fathers?
So we want you to choose from 0 to 25%, 26 to 50%, 51 to 70. Oh, that should say 75%, sorry. And 76 to 100%, or I have no clue. We have over 50% of you that have voted so far. I'm going to keep this open for you a little bit. So I'm going to close this poll in about 5 seconds. And the results are 47% said 0 to 25%. 20% of the people said 26 to 50%. 14% of the participants said 51 to 75%. 3% said 76 to 100%. And I love this, that 15% of our participants said, I have no clue.
Hey, I really appreciate everyone's honesty, man. This is the way this thing works, and it's okay to say I have no clue. And maybe that's the reason why we're here and we're having these discussions. For those of you that have, are up in above 50%, I think that's amazing that they have. Because every time we can talk, we can spend a whole another presentation easily talking about absentee fathers. That's what we're not talking about right now in this moment. We're talking about fathers who we have that opportunity to engage. So my analogy is not a sports analogy, but it's how do we actually, it was a sports analogy, so I'm not going to use it, but is how do we get these people into the class, or how do we get these from the parking lot into our services, right? How do we really engage these fathers to be, to have conversations about this and to understand that they have the support that's there. And if you are doing that, again, that's great. I would love when we get to questions and answers, you share some of the things that have been successful for your organization, because it really will benefit others who are listening. We're going to jump into why should we engage fathers? I think everyone is, pretty clear on that. So again, just to frame it, we're not talking about father absence or the impact that has on children and families in general. We are looking at that. That's, if I look at it as educational system, I don't even know if they really do ABC, D or F anymore, at least not in elementary school and junior high school in Saddleback Valley where I live, or the district that my kids go to school in. But if you're looking at it like that, a lot of times you have the kids who get the focus are the kids who are A students or F students, B and F students. There are a lot of kids that are in that middle area, the C's, who show up for the most part regularly, and for the most part they do okay on tests. Those are opportunities to kind of move those into that B and that A area. And if without any kind of extra attention, they could just kind of fall by the wayside and end up being a D or F. So we're looking at fathers who are present, but maybe not as engaged or as involved as they can be, right? So our focus, again, is on fathers who are in this picture, not fully inserted into the daily decision-making of the household and child-rearing decisions. So again, why should we engage fathers? The simple answer, because it makes so much sense, right? I mean, come on. Why would are you really going to talk to anybody who's on this webinar and they're going to say something different? No. When we go out in Orange County, we talk about this community, we have always walked away with a really positive experience. Where we end up going back and doing a lot of the traditional things that we've done, a lot of the habits that we formed, and that we're still not engaging fathers. But no one discounts the validity that it makes so much of an impact. There's so much value when you have a father who's inserted into that narrative and that daily conversation about what happens with their kids, right? So according to research, it's reported by Allen and Daly in 2007, children who have involved fathers, and of course, when we say this, we're coming from the father's lens, we understand that mothers are the riders, right? That mothers are there. But when we insert fathers to be there and to be riders like mom, kids enjoy in general school, and they enjoy school, meaning that we're reducing truancy numbers, dropout rates, and blah, 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 and they perform better academically. They are more resilient and handle stress better. And so there's a lot of talk, again, it's not the topic of the conversation, but there's a lot of talk about trauma and being trauma-informed, and people they're starting to use the ACEs, and they're trying to do some universal testing. So ACEs, for those who don't know, maybe want to look it up, Adverse Childhood Experiences. There was a study done I believe in the 90s by Kaiser. Really fascinating stuff, but it really made a correlation between the number of traumatic events that a child remembers from 0 to 17 and there's a correlation to the number of health issues that they faced as adults. So if you start thinking about being more resilient and handling stress better, we're putting our kids in a better situation to be overall healthy for longer periods of time throughout their lifespan. To be resilient, which means be able to bounce back. So if you think of a rubber band stretching and it bounce back, that's a high level of resiliency. If you take a lead number 2 pencil and snap it, it's a wrap. Even if you put tape back on it, that's not demonstrating resiliency. So for us, putting our kids, having that input of the father and the mom together, kids are more resilient because we know that life is going to throw some stuff at us. And, having your kids have the tools to be able to bounce back is really important. So developing higher self-esteem, have better peer relationships, and with all the stuff that happens with bullying and this whole social media game, all those things make a difference with the child's level of functioning and success and opportunity for growth. So having a father and involve father in this conversation means that there's an opportunity that the kids will demonstrate better decision making and have stronger impulse control. I mentioned that on the other side of things, I work with the school district. Half the referrals that we get in for young men are because there's some behavioral issues in class. You know, they want kid wants something that a peer has, and he gets up and takes it. Kid wants to go to the bathroom and gets up and walks out of the room. Kid is talking and is being distracting when the teacher is talking. And so all those things, with a father involved in the picture, you reduce those behaviors overall. And I mentioned health earlier, and we're talking about generally physically healthier. And when I say this, I don't mean that I'm not thinking of a cookie cutter body shape style, all athlete. That's not the idea of physically healthy. What I mean physically healthy is that kids have a good self-image. Kids have regular nutrition. They have mental health as well, but physically healthy doesn't mean that they're going to be a great athlete or anything like that, but it just means that they have not that they understand, but that they have a great, I would say, interaction with their environment. And I think that's physical health. So the list can go on for the duration of this training, but I'm going to ask again, why is it important? Why should we engage fathers? Well, it's important because as a parent, as a father, for me specifically, again, my rose-colored lenses, you know, my goal in raising my kids with my wife, and it's really important that you give space for every father, every parent to have their goal, right? Because they all will be unique. There may be some overlap, but they all will be unique. This is what my goal is for my kids. My goal of raising my children is for me to assist them in the transition of life into adulthood in a supportive and compassionate way. You know, I want to help them develop their strengths, understand their areas of challenge. We talked about resiliency, being able to overcome certain things, and have compassion for their fellow man. You know, my hope is that they're able to define what happiness looks like for them as they become adults. And actually, I want them to know that stuff now and to have the knowledge of how to form meaningful connections in life that have the ability to add to their definition of happiness. When I think about my goals and raising my kids, that's what I really think about. So here's some other reasons to engage fathers. So I'm going to start off with the terrible reasons not to engage. So sorry about that. So the terrible reason not to engage. So if you're thinking as a program or as an agency, how do you do these things, how to come up with resources and say it will cost too much, that's not a good reason at all. There are different ways that won't cost a lot of break the bank in order for you to figure out engaging your families, because we've been engaging families. And if you've been on the programs that I have and looking at budgets that we reserve for marketing in the nonprofit world, they're not all that robust. So you have to find different ways to be creative. So the money and the resource thing should be not a reason why you get off this course of engaging fathers. Requires too much training for staff. I will say that's somewhat of a challenge, right? Because you're all here for this conversation right now, and your company, your agencies, your companies have invested your work time for most of you to sit here for the next hour and a half, well, not for the next hour and a half, so 11:30 as we talk about this. This is the thing. When you develop mastery, I've read someplace, and I wish I can give it credit, you will develop mastery after you have 10,000 hours of doing something and doing something well, right? You know, as a social worker, if I want to get my license, I have to get like 3,200 hours before I can test and say I'm proficient at it. So, and that at that point, I still wouldn't be considered a master of the subject. So I'm relying a lot on my personal experiences and the research and the education, but I'm still probably not at 10,000 hours. The thing about training in general is that we go through trainings. Agencies, companies invest a lot for us to go through trainings, and a month from now, I may be in a training on trauma-informed care. Another month after that, I may be in a training for, leading my team as a leadership training or things like that. And I guarantee you this: I'm going to take notes, and I'm going to pay attention, and I'm going to be in there, and I'm going to say, how am I going to apply this? How am I going to apply this? How am I going to apply this? When I get into the weeds, what's going to happen is I'm going to move on to the next thing. And I'm going to try to remember, and I'm going to try to refer back to my notes. And sometimes I'm going to be successful, and sometimes I'm not. For our team, we have a conversation about this type of stuff. How do we impact the community that we serve every day? And so we have a decided advantage over people whose main focus is not just bringing in dads. But you may want to think, if it requires too much training, it should be a regular it should be a regular topic in team meetings and things like that. So you're having that circled around you, and that doesn't necessarily take away from other opportunities. So, oops, let's see, that popped up, and I can't see for a second. Thanks. Okay, so your services are targeted for fathers. I've worked in a bunch of programs that services were targeted for fathers. And one, where I work with children with special needs, it was really important to understand how the family overall functions. Children with special needs, the families actually had a divorce rate that was way higher than typical families without a child with special needs, because of, the number of challenges you have to face, the number of support systems you have to have in there didn't leave a lot of time for the couple to be together and to grow together and continue to strengthen their relationship. I've worked with families. I had listed that I worked with a program or home visitation for new moms. And when I was there, it wasn't targeted for dads. It was targeted for new moms. What I would do as a program supervisor was I was trying to find ways to engage the fathers as well, because for moms, they were learning about postpartum, depression. They're learning about developmental milestones. They're learning all this great stuff. And you can't tell me that wasn't information that would have benefited the overall family if fathers hadn't been brought into that question, brought into that discussion. So the belief that another terrible reason not to engage fathers is the belief that history has proven that fathers don't access services. And that is true. They haven't accessed services, typically, if you look at it from a historical lens. But what's our role in there? What could we have controlled? We can say that fathers and in general, men and women are wired differently, and that fathers typically don't come in and access those things. Well, if we do things the same way, what is the definition of insanity? If we do things the same way each time and expect a different result, then we're a little bit crazy, right? So if that is your belief, then we got to kind of get rid of that kind of thinking, or belief that mothers will bring them in if they want services. That as a program was probably one of our first mistakes. Dads Matter started off the Children's Bureau, and my son just walked in the door from his accelerated math class. So as we, let me get back on track. Oh, when we first started Dads Matter, and so we're going out, our plan was we're gonna use 4 of the family resource centers that Children's Bureau is a lead agency in, to really bring in fathers. Because one thing that we knew for sure is that there was a lot of foot traffic coming through the doors. What we realized is at that time that moms, unfortunately, weren't the best, didn't provide the best messaging going to fathers. And even if they did it in the most constructive, supportive way, when a mother's coming to talk to her father, her ex, and to say, hey, there's this great class or resource for you for father involvement, the thing that they will hear, their significant others or ex, they will hear criticism. And a lot of times the fathers wouldn't come to us because they were feeling like they did what they were supposed to be doing. So whether it was as a provider, they're going to work and keeping a roof, taking care of basic needs. They do the church or the sports thing with their kids. And they were often the disciplinarian or the fun person. Whatever role they were doing what they were taught to do. And so having moms be the ones that bring them in service, the fathers that did come would be, almost kicking and screaming. They didn't want to be there. It's a huge commitment for them. And it was also coming in from a place where they're going to be told what they weren't doing, which is something that they didn't want to hear. So we will, sorry about that. We'll continue on with jumping over to some more positive reasons and things that we should do to really promote engagement. So great reason to promote engagement is not just from a family standpoint, but overall outcomes, for our agency. That's great stuff to report. But engaging fathers means in a lot of situations, especially if it's part of a couple unit, that they will together kind of go through some of these growth things. And that's a fantastic thing. When I worked in programs and we worked with a ton of moms and not a lot of dad support or input, I was always a little bit worried about what we're doing with the family, because anytime you're giving somebody information, that's a great thing. I mentioned I have 16 really strong years with my wife, and a couple of times there were some hiccups, along that journey. And the hiccups were, we were kind of moving on different paths, right? And we had to find a way to come to alignment. If you are only giving information to one side of the unit, they have the opportunity they're going to potentially change the way that they behave and connect with the other with their mate, with their significant other, with their ex. And when they start to change that, and the other person's not changing with them, that can push them a little bit further apart from each other. So when you have the ability to engage fathers in services where moms are there too, or even if it's a single father or not, or a father that doesn't have custodial rights, overall it brings value to not just the family, but your overall agency outcomes. So our list on here, we want to, the reason it helps us avoid the risk and resources. So a significant obstacle to father engagement and involvement in child protection process is the dichotomous thinking, right, where men either are labeled as a risk or a resource for their children, as what they should be looked at is potentially a complex of, a mix of both elements. They should be a risk, and they should be, not a risk. Or fathers are a little bit adventurous, so we're going to put that in there. But they should be able to bring both that to the table, and it's really important that we don't sit in that either or. So if they don't come in there, they're a risk to the family's detriment. If they are there, they're just a resource to provide, all the extra bells and whistles and things. Another reason is it's going to really help define what parenting is. I read this somewhere in the past couple of weeks. As long as the word parent is understood to mean mother, the support services that we all engage in will continue to fail to involve and support fathers. And that was really powerful to me. So I'm going to say it again. As long as the word parent is understood to mean mother or equated with mothering, support service will continue to fail to involve and support fathers. So again, we can go on talking for days, about the benefits of engaging fathers. It really increase outputs for your agency, which I probably put on there twice. It would decrease children living in impoverished conditions and reduces stigma associated with support. And what I mean it reduces the stigma that's associated with support is that, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, fathers are biased towards they have their personal experience and why they're biased towards receiving support or working with support services. It typically, if you look at it from a historical lens, hasn't gone over as well as we would have liked, but we are making progress. So that's what we're battling against. If you're looking at the benefit of engaging fathers, what we know is that old habits die hard and biases die hard. We know that self-determination is one of the core social worker values, which means that if a family comes in and they don't want services, they're coming in for something else, no matter what you say, that you may not be able to get them over there. They have to be in a position for readiness, at least pre-contemplation or contemplation when they come in there, if we have a chance to put some of those change theories in motion. It's important to note that engaging fathers for most agencies is going to require a lot of patience and consistency. And my first movie reference, I'm gonna use Kevin Costner's Field of Dreams. If you've ever seen it or heard of it, people usually make the association that it's a baseball movie. But one of the most iconic scenes and phrases that they use from the movie is, "If you build it, he will come." A little trivia: a lot of people actually say, "If you build it, they will come," because you're doing the baseball field and you need multiple people from baseball to have a baseball game. And in the movie, he does this, and the people who come are really talented, ghosts who come and play a baseball game. But it really, if you watch the movie, it's not about those ghosts coming together or exactly the process of building this field. It was really about his relationship with his father. And so his relationship with his father was unsatisfying, had a lot of issues, and his dad died at 13, and how he came into manhood, all those things impacted him. And so when I think about this journey of him going through and building this field and having to kind of step outside of his comfort box and do some things, I think about the work that some of us may have to do in order to create these programs and the work that we have to do to put in these programs to really engage fathers. And so, Kevin Costner's struggle with the relationship, kind of put on here, and the habits that he formed as a result of those struggles are kind of the habits that we form in engaging. That's probably one of 3 bad analogies I'm going to make, but if you get a chance to watch a movie, do it. It's a really good movie, but it's a lengthy movie, and it's like this process that we have to do. It's a long process. When we started off, again, I mentioned that on our first year, we averaged 5 people enrolled, 5 butts in seats. And now we're at over 11, close to 12 for every class, and far more, and almost double our output in terms of classes. A lot of that has happened because of the work that we've been able to do with having this conversation and staying in this space regularly, not just with our team, but with our extended teams in the community, the FRCs. And because of those things, it starts to take shape and you start to make adjustments. And now all of a sudden, not just for our programs, but fathers are coming into other programs associated with that. Unfortunately, I don't have the number. Slow connect. Oops. Ignore. Sorry about that. So we are, since I mentioned Field of Dreams, what fatherhood movies are you guys aware of, and which ones are your favorites? So poll number 3, favorite. My screen just went dark.
I will launch the poll.
Okay.
So we want to know your favorite movie about fatherhood. So we've got Father of the Bride, we have Field of Dreams that Shandi was just referring to, The Lion King, John Q, or other. And if you do put in other, go ahead and write in the chat box what your favorite movie about fatherhood is. And hopefully Shandi can get his screen back up. Let me keep this poll open for a little bit longer.
Okay, so I'm back up. Are you able to see it?
Okay, good. Yes, hold on. I'm going to close the poll in about 5 seconds. I'll let you know the results, and then Shane will let us know what people wrote in the chat box. So I'm going to close this poll. I'm going to share the results. So we have 24% of our participants said Father of the Bride. 5% said Field of Dreams. I guess a lot of people need to see that movie. 47% said The Lion King. 15% said John Q. So Shane, could you let us know some of the other movies that people listed, please?
Sure. I put up the post of the Field of Dreams clip too, just in case we wanted to see it.
That's great.
I see South Central.
Okay.
I haven't seen that one. Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The Croods.
That's a funny one. I like that one.
I've never seen that one. Trouble with the Cruise? I don't know that one either.
With the Curve.
Curve, okay.
Yeah.
One called Courageous.
Oh, I've never seen that one. Okay.
Carmen.
Mm.
And somebody jokingly put Star Wars.
Hey.
That's a great movie about fatherhood.
It is a great
movie about father engagement, yeah.
Hey, great. That's I love all these. I plan on getting this list from Shane later on, so I can do a little watching. So not that you guys need to know this, but I just recently had surgery, so I'm gonna be at home for a couple of days. So I plan on putting some of these on my watch list.
Good.
All right, so we're going to start going downhill really fast because I can talk forever and we don't have as much time. So we're going to go with, Ant-Man is a good one too. Sorry. So we're going to go with, we're adjusting this lens, right? We're trying to change this narrative. So as a goal, we're trying to meet families, some of our engagement and outreach practices, philosophies. We meet families where they are. We try to partner with the family. We're strength focused. We really need to understand our target population. So we went back to the poll about, who are your guys walking in and what industry or what area of our health and human services are you in? Or is it medical or educational? Is it prevention? Is it mental health, et cetera? You want to make sure that your services that you offer are valuable services to them. And the easiest way to find that out is ask them. Being genuine and respectful and demonstrate self-awareness, honoring cultural factors. I'm just going to start off really quickly with that list, is that now those are things that have been proven successful in probably at all or not in at all of our agencies. Otherwise, we wouldn't have contracts to work with, right? But maybe not so, and maybe not as successful as it is in working with fathers or bringing them in. So the invitation is to take whatever strategy that you're using and then to put a fatherhood lens on top of it to see what that looks like, right? And to really understand what that looks like. But because as we talked about, fathers may have different needs as a mom coming in for services, but really trying to understand that and work and looking at how you can apply it on each level of family. So if you're going with meet the family where they are, what does that actually mean, right? Well, meeting the family for the sake of this discussion is meeting the family and looking at each way that you can connect with each family member, right? So if you have this case where you're working with a family and the family is a multiracial family, Hispanic male, Caucasian female, 5-year-old boy, then what things would you factor into how to meet this, how to meet with this family? Where they are, what things would be of interest, what services that you're actually promoting or, are offering, and how would each one look at that? So a lot of times we have the same conversation that we have scripted out to communicate with it, and that may resonate with one parent. If they're both in the room, it may not resonate with the other one, but making sure that we spend time connecting that message in the way that the other person needs to hear it. So, we go back, and I mentioned the YMCA. The YMCA and having families with special needs, I would be a lot of after-school care programs, and they never had problems putting butts in seats. Their enrollment numbers were always well. They didn't have a ton of father or familial engagement. And part of the reason is that what they specialized in was in serving kids, and they did that to a very, very high degree. And so a lot of times when we are thinking about things, you want to be able to think about it on an equal scale if possible, if you're trying to impact change. One of the things that you would think about is if you're doing some type of home-based, say if the child was in our toddler home visitation program, and you're hearing that there's some behavioral challenges. One of the things that you want to understand is what those behavioral challenges look like and what context do these behaviors and situations these behaviors occur. If we're only interviewing one parent, then we're not fully getting a grasp of how those interactions and how those behaviors are impacting the family, right? So it's great to be able to talk with mom and find out if mom is the primary caretaker. It's great to find out that information. If dad is the primary caretaker, it's great to have that one-on-one dialogue to get that information. If they're in a lot of cases, we're only having that conversation from one. So you have a person, in most cases, the mom, who's given their interpretation of what the issues are from their lens. And so we're totally missing out on the opportunity to fully support this family and to engage everyone to be accountable in what they can do. And I think that's really important for us to be mindful of. Partnering with the family. We'll say this for fathers in general. Fathers aren't coming in for education. It just doesn't happen regularly. Fathers will, depending on why they're coming in for services, whether or not they were mandated or voluntold to do a program, whether they're in a state of crisis where they feel like their access to their children is being threatened or has already been compromised and they're looking to get back on their feet and get in there. They don't want to come to a place often that's just going to talk to them and tell them what to do. So really being able to partner with the father in designing whatever his ideas of success and developing goals look like. That's important. It's what we do with moms regularly. However, the difference is we're having the same conversation in the same way with mom. Mom may be a little bit more open to the idea of coming to a place and having like that teacher-student type of deal. With fathers, in our experience, and again, I'm going from my own rose-colored lens, are more responsive to when you have a space where you can facilitate and really get their input so you can understand who they are and what their goals are. So in general, if you start off by telling somebody what they're going to get from your services, especially a father, oftentimes that's going to leave them feeling unengaged, uninspired, and you may not ever see them again. So, but if you start off by asking them, how can you be a service to them? How can you be a service to his family? What are their visions of what does success look like for their family? What does getting into that better space look like for your family? And then open up that dialogue, then you're able to have some dialogue. But if you go the opposite route and you start telling them what they're going to get, how they're going to get it, you're going to be sitting in a space with a lot of awkward silence, and that's probably going to be the last time that you're able to see that father, unless they're doing the drop-off thing, right? So the general philosophies is what I hope your takeaway is from this, is that the general philosophies may be the same. However, executing those philosophies to make it have more of a dad lens, a father lens on there, could really be the difference in you having more success in bringing them in. So I know about this. We talked a lot of personal history and stuff like that. If you ever had thoughts like this or any other thoughts going through your head, then you have some bias issues, right? So, thinking he obviously learned to throw a football from his dad. I've been around a lot of youth sports and seeing like that. Well, my wife throws a spiral 10 times better than I do. I'm not going to show proof of that, but just trust me on that. If you ever thought, I was working with a social worker, and the social worker was talking about that the child shows up hungry every day. And the social worker said, well, she doesn't have a snack. The little daughter doesn't have a snack, but she was raised by a single father. And you know how fathers are. That's an obvious bias. Folks who come into this field doing what we do, saying that my daughter can play football or soccer or baseball, but they can't play dress up, right? Like that's going to impact the decision, sexual orientation of a child. Whatever biases we come in, it will have some impact on engagement. So whether it's intentional or not, it can have serious ramifications when prevailing thoughts like that kind of go unchecked. When it comes to services, any thoughts and conscious that believe that mothers are more important in services than fathers, and fathers aren't willing to help, thoughts like fathers can't be the primary caretaker, thoughts like fathers are most often the perpetrator in all DV instances. You can look at data and see that, but data doesn't reveal everything. So you making that determination in your head and treating a person in a certain manner based on that, that's an issue. If you have thoughts like fathering is less important than mothering, that's an issue. Fathering and mothering in general look very different. We're talking about if you have two parents who are both getting their influence, they're two parents engaging, two people are going to have two different ways of interaction, and it's important to note. But addressing and being able to be self-aware of some of these biases that we carry with us will ultimately alter your agency's efforts in engaging fathers. So bias, for anyone who doesn't know, we're going to define bias as an inclination or prejudice for or against one person or group. So in other words, unconscious bias or unconscious feelings we have towards other people, feelings that play a strong part in influencing our judgment of certain people and groups, away from being balanced or even-handed, and even affect with people in different areas of life. A lot of times we see bias in the workplace. We're not going to get involved in that today. There's a Harvard researcher. I'm going to try to pronounce her name correctly. She has a great TED Talk. Mahzarin Banahi. I believe it's I listed in the references as well. But she really does a lot of work on over 2 decades of work on biases. And people, if they're doing a self-inventory of their biases, a large majority of people will be like, nah, I'm good. I've addressed these things, so I don't think about these things. Well, according to her research, she said that couldn't be farther from the truth. Her research supports that our actions toward others are heavily influenced by these biases, our perceptions, our attitudes, behaviors, our attention, our listening skills, our microaffirmations. How much or little do we comfort certain people? So mentioning about the father that was potentially comes in to seek services because he's a perpetrator. If my bias is that this father is just, it's just evil, is beyond help, then the way that I go out to support this father through whatever growth that he's asking for is going to be changed with that. So NFI President Christopher Brown had this to say, when professionals hold a negative view of fathers, they are reluctant to engage fathers and may unwittingly support negative maternal views of fathers by not encouraging the mothers to involve fathers. That's a mouthful. Professionals also reinforce fathers' negative view of themselves by not proactively engaging fathers to show that they can be good parents. I like that whole statement except for good parents, because again, if I have a father that's in front of me that's done all these positive things, whether, being a coach, and I keep saying that because I've been a coach, going to church, you are providing for your family, protecting your family. Those are all fantastic things. Those are all fantastic ways to be there and to support your family. Where we typically start off with is, where do you want to be? Is there anything else that you want to do? We get a chance to talk about some research and the impact that fathers have. And when we start having this conversation with fathers in general, and we ask where they are now, is that the space they want to stay in? Most of them say no, they want to do more. A lot of them didn't feel like they had the creative license to do more. And going back to our SFI curriculum, and that's what they've been taught, not just from a family perspective, but from a societal perspective. The imagery that we see in the media, things that we watch on commercials, the things that we see reflected around us, those things oftentimes suggest that those are the roles that we're supposed to be in. Now we're starting to see some of that narrative change in some of our commercials, and it's been fantastic. There's one where it just really talks about the way that men and women think. It's called The Nail. If you get a chance to look it up on YouTube. But it's a man and a woman that's having a discussion about life or an issue that's bothering the woman, and how the the husband keeps inserting himself as a problem solver for her. Really good one if you get a chance to see it. But I'm going to jump on and keep going and throw out some numbers for you, some interesting facts. This stuff comes from the Census Fatherhood stats from 2013, so it's a little bit old, but 70.1 million. That's the number of estimated fathers are across the U.S. So there's a ton of folks that we have an opportunity to engage. 24.7 million is the number of fathers who are part of a married couple with children younger than 18. 2 million is the number of single fathers. 17% of custodial parents were single men. 214,000 is the estimated number of stay-at-home fathers, and those stay-at-home fathers are supporting 434,000. I told you I'm not a numbers guy, you guys, so don't laugh at me. When fathers are more involved in the lives of their kids, especially, in education, their children learn more, perform better at school. We talk about this, and exhibit healthier behavior. Even when fathers do not share a home with their kids, because of the 70 million fathers that are estimated across the U.S. with children under 18, there are 24.7. So if you do the quick math, that's about 46.3 fathers who live outside of the home. Some of those are absent fathers, but a lot of them are still involved. But even when fathers don't share a home with their children, their active involvement can have a lasting and positive impact. There are countless ways to be involved in children's education and lives in general. So the impact of media on this. So if you're looking up here, you may recognize some of these fathers. If you watch TV as much as I did growing up and still do, a lot of the imagery that we see and that we have formed some of our opinions on fathers were represented by a lot of the gentlemen that you see here. And the way that for people who may have had an absent father, they may have looked as a father in the Black community. A lot of times he's not represented on here. John Amos, who played James on Good Times, was looked at as an authority figure in the Black community growing up. So I'm a kid of the 70s, and that's what I watched. My father was there, but I also identified with James as a father figure and an example of somebody else strong. But the way that, and we will walk out seeing and thinking or believing in how these things kind of color our lenses and how we think about fathers. So you had more, for one of the first times in television history, you had Tony Danza, who's down at the bottom, second one from the last with the towel over his shoulder. Tony Danza, who's the boss, who came in and he worked as kind of like a nanny and a maid, which was, he had a lifestyle as a boxer, and he kind of switched to his role. It was one of the times that society and the media had said, hey, man can do more than just XYZ, provide and protect. And it's great to be able to get this information, and because it helps us have some of these conversations. So here's some television stats from Chris Brown. He reveals that nearly every home, 97% of homes in America, has at least one TV. The average home contains nearly 3 TVs. Don't talk about me, I have 5. I grew up with my aunt who even had one in the bathroom, a television in the bathroom, and a television in the laundry room. That Americans watch TV 3 to 5 hours a day. I happily don't hit that stat unless it's basketball season. I'm watching the Celtics. That's my second reference to sports, you guys. Adults watch nearly 38% more TV than children, which is surprising because I grew up in the age where we called the television the babysitter, right? But when we look at all these things, that means a lot of people are being fed a lot of information. And no matter what race or socioeconomic status is depicted, the portrayal of fathers in commercials and advertising plays a huge role in how we see fathers. Studies in general show that commercials rarely portray men as nurturers. Chris Brown also said that in his studies, when fathers were included in commercials, none of them were portrayed as nurturers, where half the mothers that were in commercials are portrayed as nurturers. I think that's really interesting. All right, and I got to apologize. So I put somebody in here that I didn't ask for permission, but they've been at a place where we had our waiver sharing this with the public. So I got them. They know who they are when they listen to this. And so I'm going to start off by saying on this slide, research shows the benefit of father involvement. These things I think we know are obvious. Mothers and fathers hold babies differently. So at 8 weeks old, a child can tell who's approaching and who's holding them. And they're cooed when they're They're ready to be cool and nurtured when mom picks them up, and when dad picks them up, they're ready to be excited, right? Mothers respond differently, or not mothers, that kids respond differently to stress. We talk about resilience. They interact differently, peer relations. They play differently, different social, emotional focus, more healthy. So how does your personal experience influence your behaviors in practice? The beliefs that we form in our childhood and early teens they form our core beliefs. And what that means is that whether they're good or bad, those are the core beliefs that are harder to grow into an adult and change. Beliefs that we adopt as adults are more easily influenced, but beliefs that we had as a kid are rooted, and it takes a lot of work to get those things to change. Me, I'm affected by the impact of my father. So my memories of my father taking me to the doctor are pretty non-existent, except for one time. I probably spent more time at the racetrack with him than taking to the doctors. So I am doing the Karate Kid. I'm doing the crane in the bathroom. I kick my foot through a shower door, slice my leg open. My dad comes home. My mom is on a trip with church. Can't remember where they went at the time. But my dad, the whole time, he's wolfing and he's talking and he's saying that he shouldn't take me to the hospital, that I deserved it for acting like a fool. And I remember all those things because it annoyed me to a great deal. But when we got into the doctor's office, he sat there next to me, held my hand while they were putting the 70 stitches into my leg. And my dad he passed years ago. My dad was a Vietnam veteran. So he's this big bad dude who believed in confrontation as a lifestyle. Was sitting there holding my hand, and I can't remember too many other times that he held my hand. And he held it actually, he didn't hold it for the whole time because he ended up passing out and they put him on a gurney next to me. I shouldn't be sharing that story, but it's one of my favorite dad stories, so we won't speak of it again. But when we start thinking about devices, those types of things help in my experiences as I look back, absolutely impacted me when I came into this field to start working. And through use of supervision and some of that training stuff that agency should be able to provide, we should be able to at least be aware of our biases. We can't escape our personal frame of reference, but we can be aware of its influence as we work with families. And that's really important. So next poll, let's go. Why did you choose this field? So I didn't. It chose me. I want to give back. I love helping people to contribute to a better society, to give voice to those otherwise unheard. Personal.
So if you do have another thought on this, please go ahead and enter those thoughts into the chat box and we will have Shane read those out. I'm going to leave it open for a little bit longer so that more of you can vote on this. I'm going to close the poll in about 5 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So we have 17% of the participants said, I didn't, it chose me. 37% said to give back, I love helping people. 22% to contribute to a better society. 15% to give voice to those otherwise unheard. And 9% said it's personal or other. Shane, did we have any comments in the chat box?
Yeah, one person said all of the above, all of those reasons.
Yeah.
And another person stated that her son was born with disabilities and now able to help other parents that have experienced the same things.
Very nice.
All these choices actually resonate with me, and I'll probably say one of the above. But the one that was a catalyst for me to get into this field was personal. My nephew was taken away from our family through some circumstances that I just didn't understand at the time, and caused me a lot of pain and frustration, and caused me at the moment to stop and wonder why I normalized such dysfunction and caustic behaviors. So we all come in for a different reason. I'm glad you are all here though, because you're going to make tremendous input or tremendous differences. So not impossible, but challenging. So when we think about working with the work that we're going to have to do this, we're going through, again, thoughts and looking at data that fathers just don't access services. And it's a long, sometimes it's like molasses going uphill, right? The salmon swimming upstream. It's slow progress, but being able to understand and measure the progress is really important. I got this from a presentation that Nick did, and I love the statement, underserving fathers is underserving children. So when I think really quickly about what that means, that we know this, when fathers are present in the birthing room, that if you do look forward 10 years, are still involved heavily with the child, and that's a great thing, which is going to speak to all the skills and the benefits of that. When fathers and mothers are together, if they're able to be together, that's great. But during the first thousand days of life, there will be no more. There are so many neurosynaptic connections that are formed, and at no other point in your life will you ever learn at that rate. And to be able to get the influence from both, parents is just really key to really helping develop those kids with self-esteem, with great peer interactions that are great problem solvers and more resilient. That's some good stuff. So as you're thinking about the work that we need to do, we won't succeed at engaging fathers if we get sucked into the stereotypes and biases. So that absent fathers are deadbeats who don't care about their kids, that fathers aren't good parents, or fathers won't come in for services, or fathers don't take help because of machismo, or there's nothing we can do. If you don't expect this work to take time and effort, you will quit. Absolutely. And as we've seen through our program, to date, we've serviced over 800 fathers, and many of them are couples, are coming in with their partners, and it's been a great effort. But it was slow building. There were times where we stopped and we looked and we said, "Hey, this is scary." There was a time where in our grant we got a notice from our funder that said, "Hey, you guys need to be doing more," and we were able to continue to say, "Hey, we're tracking on this and we're doing this thing. We just got to keep making those efforts." You may try something and it may be really close to work, and a lot of times people either stop it altogether or they do a new system. Think about small tweaks that you can do to really engage fathers. So keys to engaging fathers. I'm going to finish up in 6 minutes. We can ask some questions. So knowing that many times when fathers are coming in with their own bias against the service agency, and I'll say that is meaning I was reared by a Vietnam vet who loved combat. And when I feel like I'm being attacked, then I have the tendency to want to attack back. Understand that when fathers are coming there, it's not, for many of them, it's not a natural thing. And they're really defensive about the reason why they have to be in there and some of their experiences that they carry with them. So be ready for that conversation and understand how you're going to react when someone feels like they are attacking you. If a father finds his way to your agency, understand that he wants some help. So finding your end is really important, how you need to communicate with them. Make sure that you're asking what they're looking for. What is their end game? So you came here. How can I be of service? What do you want to become as a result of this? Is a huge question. I started off earlier by saying that we at our agency, at our program, we say that fathers are as important to the parenting process as moms. A lot of times our fathers haven't been told that they matter and why they matter, and that's a really important thing. Being genuine and respectful and upfront and honest. Talk about the elephant in the room. Don't dance around that stuff. You'll lose the trust that you're starting to build, and that's really important. So being familiar with the existing barriers for fathers and owning up to them. If that's something that your agency is unfortunately dealing with at the time, you can say, "Hey, I know we don't have services during the time. We don't stay open until 7 o'clock where you can make it over here. Is there anything else that we can do if we can't change that?" Being upfront and honest will help put you in that position to really connect with the fathers. I would say focus on adjusting your mindset to focus on how you can engage dad as opposed to all the things that you're doing that you're not doing well. Just as a personal frame of reference, I try to approach problem solving from what do I want to accomplish, not what do I want to avoid. And oftentimes when I'm able to come from that perspective, I think of a different set of responses and a different set of potential resolutions. Another thing that I didn't mention is fathers who found you through the internet or personal referrals looking for help. I did say that. As in general, people don't spend time looking for something that they don't want. So when they find you, they've gone through some efforts to get there. And when they find you by referral for someone that they know personally, think of it like my next movie analogy. think about it like a lot of those mob movies. So you got Goodfellas, you got the Godfather saga, you got Carlito's Way. There's always talk of somebody who's a made man. That's somebody who's done enough and earned enough cachet to have this relationship. And when they vouch for someone, that person that they vouch for walks in the door with some trust. When someone finds you by referral, you have some trust. It's your job at that point to cultivate and build upon that trust, right? And so it's really crucial to respond in ways that will put you in a position to be successful. So consider these things, these efforts on a very, very, very basic level. Think about it like this. If that first meeting is so important, then have the people who are best at those positions, best at having those conversations in those positions. It may not be something that you're going to go to work tomorrow and say, okay, we got to switch out. But there's some people whose personalities just aren't necessarily the person that you want to see when you first walk in. My analogy is the DMV. The DMV is not a bad place to be. For a lot of people, it has been historically because they've had some people who were unhappy in some of their roles. And so when you went in there, not only did you have to wait potentially, but you also encountered somebody who really wasn't inspired by the work that they do. So when you have people in your front end, it's really important because once you recognize that people are really great at the connection thing, a lot of times they get opportunities to move up. But we need to have people in those key points of entry to really engage some of these conversations, because the conversation with a dad and a mom are two different. So you need somebody who has the ability to be able to have these kind of fluid conversations. And with that, understand the difference between interviewing and conversating. I mentioned that dads don't come in for education. They want to come in and they want to be partnered with. They want to have in classes. We've had a lot of experience doing facilitation instead of just straight teaching. And really understanding when someone comes in, and again, you have that initial trust. If you spend a lot of time asking on the forefront about their lives and about the trauma or crisis that they're in right in that moment, even though you have that trust, you're going to start to walk that trust backwards, right? So not just asking questions and having an intake form and just setting to go, but start really talking with so you can have an understanding of where they're coming from and what their needs are before you get into it. And being sure to address every father. This is something that I know personally, that when I walked in with my wife and I went to, I went to almost every OBGYN appointment. I've been to most of their doctor's appointments for their lives. I walk into a room and in many cases, even if they said hi to me, they went straight to talking to my wife. Now, me being me, I jumped up right next to her and I want them to understand that, hey, we're in this together. We're both the parents and we have invested interest in the raising of these kids. Again, I'm not holding anyone else to my standard of engagement on both ends and advocating for my right to have a voice. A lot of your fathers won't have that coming in. So making sure that you address every father, not in a way to where they feel like they're being bombarded or attacked, but just in a way that they feel engaged. So it's not going to be my last movie reference. You don't want them to feel like Julia Roberts in A Pretty Woman when she goes out on Rodeo Drive and she's dressed in her work attire and they really treat her disrespectfully. I'm not saying that would happen, but in that neutral zone where we don't really acknowledge the father's presence, pull them into the conversation. When I say standing knee deep in the water, and I'm going to end with these two, that means you're already doing some of these things, and this one's going to take a little bit more effort to do. So once in programs doing more facilitation instead of teaching, it's really important. Making changes to the physical environment. And when I say making changes to the physical environment, think about, gender inclusive by design, furniture, color schemes, lighting, artwork and objects, magazines. Is there something that's going to be of interest to father to say, hey, this is the place that I belong? One of the easiest things that you can change. Being prepared to be challenged from time to time and start off with what they think, not you telling them. On a macro level change, and you can talk about some organizational assessments, hours of operation, being available during non-traditional work hours, regular training for staff or friendly assessments so you can figure out where you are, changing marketing materials, including both parents on the forms and the expectation that these people should be, if they're in the house or if they're involved and they need to be present, at least at some of these meetings. For our last poll, what's the first thing you think about when you think father engagement? And then we're going to wrap up in a minute and get some questions.
All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of time to answer these questions. I have to change my thought process. I'm with the right team to make this happen. Let's get to work. I'm already doing this. Kudos to me. I definitely could use more help, or other. And if you put in anything under other, go ahead and put that in the chat box. So just stay with us for a little bit longer. We're going to be wrapping this up. So we got a little over half of you that are voting. I'm going to close this poll in about 5 seconds. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So we have 16% that say, I have to change my thought process. Thank you for saying that out loud. That's true for a lot of us. 52%, oh, this is good. I'm with the right team to make it happen. 8% say, I'm already doing this. Kudos to me. 20%, I definitely could use more help. And 4% said other. Shane, did anybody put any comments in the chat box on that?
No, nothing specific.
Okay, thank you all.
So we are going to wrap. That's my email address. Feel free. I didn't leave as much time as I anticipated. Feel free to reach out. I work with Shane and Carrie to get some of your answers responded to. But remember this, I'm coming from the perspective of not just a father, but I work in a father involvement program. So we talk and live this philosophy every day. We had a social worker who they're putting together a committee to engage parents. And he said, hey, I want to come in, I want to hang out with you guys and go to one of your meetings. And I told him, dude, if you go to one of our meetings, just like the trainings, you're going to walk away. You're going to feel like, hey, that was some cool stuff. But I didn't learn anything that was groundbreaking. If you guys came in here for magic sauce, you're not going to have magic sauce, unfortunately. But if you start to shape that, you reframe the way that you're thinking, a lot of the things that you're doing are really, really close to being able to work with fathers. You just have to slide on those rose-colored lenses, right? When I go to Ruth Chris, I go for the steak, not the lobster mac and cheese. Even though the lobster mac and cheese is great, it's the steak that they sell. So when you're thinking about who you're targeting and who you want to come in the door, if fathers are your secondary or tertiary level of thought process, then unfortunately, you're not going to see the progress in the way that you're hoping to. I'm Sean D. Johnson. I really appreciate you guys' time today and attention and just your interest in the topic at hand.
This webinar will be put up on our YouTube channel. Give me till tomorrow to get that done. You will also receive an evaluation electronically. So please, please complete the evaluation. It really helps us as we are developing future webinars, if you have any ideas for us. And with that, Shandi, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much, you guys. Have a blessed day.
Yeah, that leg.